this is the ceiling of the associated high land consumption. For this reason, residential construction in city with a high degree of density is particularly important and interesting. In recent years, exciting concepts have emerged in residential construction with regard to functional mixes and new concepts in plan. And in these lectures, I show the basics, like the basic strategies, how you plan housing. And at the end, I will also show you exciting new projects. So maybe just before that, a little intro in the typology of houses, like the single, the duplex, the row, like high density horizontal housing, and stacking, like the multifamily housing, which we will address today. So the basic circulation types in residential construction, you can differ like in point and line, like vertical circulation and like the vertical circulation type of housing and the horizontal circulation type of housing. That means that the vertical circulation, we call it a Spanner-type. I don't think there's a special word in English. I call it core circulation. It's like the staircase and then you come to the residential units. Versus the corridor circulation, like the linear circulation systems in housing, with, for example, an inside corridor and an outside corridor. Like the core circulation, you have different types of core circulation, like, for example, the one staircase per one unit. So you access with one staircase, like on each level, one unit, which is not a very economic strategy. So one circulation type, which is really common, is the one staircase per two units, and you can add them, which is kind of like really common in Germany, especially by the Zeilenbau. And then you can add like the residential units, for example, one staircase per 3 units. And then you go ahead with 4 units and 6 units. And then you have this kind of like tower house or core house, where you have the central circulation, the vertical circulation in the middle, and the apartments being organized around them. For the horizontal type of circulation, we call it corridor circulation. You have like either an outside or an inside corridor where you can access your residential units, and there are various types of horizontal circulation. You can see on the left side if the corridor is like outside attached to the building, and on the right side you see which is really common for example for the hotel construction or the hotel buildings, where the corridor lies in the house, like inside. I show you like examples, like building examples. Another thing which is really important are the zoning desks. So you have like a range you can plan, for example, for living spaces. If they're like single oriented, so like light is coming from one side, they shouldn't be deeper than 4 to 6 meters. That's really important. So if there's just like one orientation, like one side where the light comes from. So you have like just a limit to the 4 to 6 meters. Side rooms, they should be like 2 to 3 meters. They can lie like deeper. And for the internal circulation in the apartment, you kind of like take 1 meter as like moving zone. And for the external circulation, you start between 150 to 2 meters. That's important because when you start your urban design, you have to plan with certain building dimensions. And you can see on the right side, I take my mouse, hopefully that works and everyone can see my mouse. So you have like different scenarios. If light comes from both sides, you can put a room like 4 to 8 meters deep. Here it's like a core circulation. Your room is 4 to 6 meters, and then you can like plan side rooms like in the inside of the apartment complex. So your whole depth is 6 to 8 meters. So those are like room or dimensioning, which is important for the planning. So just a little repeatment. What is also important when you position your building on your site, never place housing or residential units exclusively towards the north. So you shouldn't do that, because you have to provide as an architect that light, like there's sunlight in your apartment. So a living unit which is completely oriented to the north can't provide this. So you should avoid placing an apartment exclusively north. So towards the core circulation, that's like the staircase, which is yellow, to one staircase per one unit. So what's good at the advantage is you get light from all sides, but it's not very economic. So a common thing is the 2 residential units per staircase. So you also can provide at least light from 3 sides. And if you have 3 units per one staircase, like the middle unit, just get lights from one side, which is not as nice. So you just have to be aware by planning that you have to avoid certain things. So in addition to that, you can see the different lighting orientations and configurations. And I show you now an example. It's the Wohnanlage in Hannover von Fink und Jocher. It's a classical 1 staircase, 2 units, core circulation type. You can see the site plan. It's an urban block, and you see like the L-shaped apartment complex sitting on the corner, and you can see like the 1 staircase accessing 2 apartments, like the core type. And what is interesting about this apartment is that it has a really clever basic structure. It has the basic structure with the staircase and the 2 apartments on the sides. And it has gray, like a flexibility space, which can be adapted to one apartment or the other. And the interesting thing is, with that basic ground configuration, you can plan different types of apartments, like a classical apartment type, an atrium, and we call it all space apartment type, where you have like a main big living space and little spaces on the side, no corridor. And then like we call it cube, like a serving cube sitting in the apartment, which provides the bathroom and the kitchen, and the space kind of like floats around. And like the loft type, so you have like your kitchen and bathroom on the side, and there's like just one space floating around that kind of core thing. And the we call it Durchwohnen, if the living room is kind of like oriented to both sides. So like in big size, you see the basic structure with the staircase. You see the flexible room, which can be, it provides you a little bit of flexibility. You can put it to one apartment or to the other, or you can even access the room from the corridor. And a different type of apartment configurations. So the whole topic of flexibility is getting more and more important. Another type of core building types, like a core circulation, we call it Punkthaus, point house, is the Wohnüberbauung Steinacker, close to the Zürichsee in Zurich. It's 5 buildings with a central staircase, and they are placed on the side in that position that everyone has a good view to the lake of Zurich. So that's the reason why they're kind of like placed like that and a little bit turned. Like a view from the entrance level, how the 5 buildings are connected on the ground level. And here is the floor plan with the central staircase in the middle. And what is really smart, that you have the central staircase, and then you have like a ring of side rooms around the central staircase, the central vertical circulation. You have the internal circulation ring. So we can kind of like remind what I showed you with the depth zone, the 2 to 3 meters for the side rooms, the 1 meter for the internal circulation, and then the living spaces around. What's really nice at this apartment complex, that the living spaces, which I marked in pink, they have orientation from 2 directions. So you have like in every living room, this kind of like 2 sides view and 2 sides possibility of getting the sun. Red are the separation of the 4 apartments on the floor. But what is outstanding, that with this kind of like basic structure, you can generate different types of apartment sizes. And that's a thing which is also outstanding for this project. In this project, there are like different type of apartment sizes. There's also a kindergarten. There's also a care living group. View to the care living group, the kindergarten, and the central core with the staircase, which gets light from above. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed, I make it with the mouse. So I can show you the kindergarten has this whole space for its activity, and there's another little apartment and another little apartment. So you have the possibility to make a big half in that ground structure and two little halves. And so with that kind of like basic structure, you can generate different types of room organizations. Okay. Now I go, where's the mouse? Sorry. My mouse is gone. Sorry, my computer is not doing what I want.
Sometimes if you close the annotate bar, it comes back. Sometimes it freezes when you use annotate.
Yes, but I don't find my mouse to close it. Here I have it. Somehow my mouse is gone, so I think I have to get out somehow my computer is frozen. Oh, here it is. Okay, perfect. So I stop. I have to go out and go back again, but it'll be fine. So sorry for the short interruption. I will continue. Okay, everybody can see it again? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, the diffuse to the different functions. And now I come to the corridor circulation, to examples for like the horizontal circulation. And we start with some aspects. Like one important thing is if you have like a interior corridor in your apartment, you have to provide light into the corridor. Otherwise, you have like the need of artificial lighting, which is not very energetic or not very good for energetic aspects. So you have to somehow get light into your building. That's like one aspect. The other aspects, we have like also terms in Germany for like single level apartments, we call it flat, and multi-level apartments, we call it maisonette. And with the multi-level apartments, you also can save circulation space. And I show you that in the following examples. We start with the single level apartments. And one really famous example is the Lafayette Apartments in Detroit from Mies van der Rohe from '63. And you can see the inside corridor and the two vertical staircases. And you also see the orientation of the building. And you can see that no apartments are oriented towards north. But like the disadvantage of the inside corridor is that you have no natural light in it. Like dimensioning, like one apartment is 6.5 wide and depth, so you can provide a good lighting and natural lighting in the apartment. Then like the famous example is the Unité d'Habitation in Marseille, where Corbusier arranged two like apartments, several apartments around one corridor, and he uses multi-level apartments so he can save vertical, horizontal circulation space. And you have like a inside corridor just every 3 levels. So it's a pretty clever system. and he also gets in from 2 sides light into the apartment. I hope everyone knows that example, so I will go over it really quickly. Like the famous picture Corbusier had in his mind was like the structure of a ship, or the system of a ship, where like a whole city was like in one complex, in one building, in one structure. And he realized it in his Unité, but we will focus on the apartment, and you can see the corridor, yellow marked, the inside corridor. You see in blue the side rooms, which lie in like in the dark parts of the apartment. And you can see the double height spaces where he can get light deep into his apartment. The whole Unité d'habitation is based on the modular dimensioning system. So it's worth to take a look at it, but we are short in time, so I will go there over it really quickly. Like you can see the models, and you can see how the light falls deep into the building because of the double height and the big chance to get light from 2 sides by kind of like putting the whole apartment over the circulation space. So every 3 levels, there's just a corridor, which is really clever. You can see it here again in section and in plan. And it's really like less or really narrow sizing of the apartment. And it's like 366 based on the modular typology. And it's 20 meters deep, like the whole structure. What it means for the living spaces, you can see it here. You see the double height living space, how light comes in, and a few back towards the entrance door on the bottom, and the upper floors with the double height. Now I show you the Tyroldgasse in Graz von Kovac Architects from 1990. A strategy to get light into the corridors, and they interpret the building like they say the corridor, the inside corridor should be like an urban street with the entrances towards the urban street, but like the urban street is fully covered, and you have this kind of like row house types in the ground and first level, and on the top level you have the apartments. So you can see the ground level with the little entrances with niches and the vertical circulation. The whole building complex is 17 meters wide. And you see the upper floors, so really like row houses in this big structure. And on the upper floors, you can see the apartments. So with that strategy, the architects provide natural light in their building. So now we come to the outside corridors. We call it in Germany, we have a special term. I don't know if you have that term or a similar term in English. We call it Laubengang, like the outside corridor. So what do you have to look when you're planning an outside corridor? The advantage is you have light from both sides. For example, the Dammerstock in Karlsruhe by Gropius, like each living unit is 6 meters wide and 8 meters deep. So we have the depth zones. I showed you in the beginning. There are like the repeating dimensioning, which is important. And you see the side rooms. And another aspect for planning outdoor corridors, you have to, the big advantage is that there can be like communication zones, but they have to have niches, and they have to have communication zones so people can meet and talk. And I show you in another project, like in Barcelona, how that kind of typology works today. But the disadvantage of this Laubengang or outside corridor is that you have to keep attention what rooms you're gonna put towards the outside corridor, because in the moment you're getting light into the rooms, you also have the view into the rooms, and you have this kind of like conflict between exterior and interior. Like another strategy, like Corbusier did it with this inside corridor, you can also do it with the outside corridor to kind of like access the apartments in one level and kind of like live through on the upper level. That's a project from Ataria Schneider, and you can see you have like in one level the access to the apartments, and you have an interior staircase or an interior stair, and the apartments on the upper level is kind of like stacked through. You can see that. I'll show you in the section. You can see the entrance level, and then the individual levels where you don't have the conflict between interior and exterior or public and private. And you get both from both sides light, and you save circulation space. I show you now interesting strategies and examples for high density housing. One complex is the Nagoya apartments from Sejima. Like on this size at Nagoya, 4 architects get a chance to plan housing. All in all, 420 housing units for about 70 square meters. But we focus on the Sana Sejima building, which is quite interesting structure. You can see that there's also an external access, an external corridor to access the apartments. You can see it here. And it has a really rigid building structure. Every 3 meters, you have like a concrete construction wall, which is 4.5 meters depth. And it defines like in between 2 walls, a room. So you have the vertical circulation in the middle of the building and on the outside. And you have the outside corridor on the north side. That's also often if you have like no chance to orient your building east-west, or you have to orient it northwest, you can use the north side in order to give access to the apartments with an outside corridor. Or if you have a loud street, for example, you don't want to live, it's the loudness. That could be, for example, a decision to make or to plan an outside corridor building. In this case, the building is really slim because the architect, she wanted to make a natural climatization of the building. So you can, how you call it, you can make a natural cross ventilation. So that's the reason why the building is so slim. And architect choose those, this kind of like slim construction. The really clever thing is with this kind of like ground structure is that you have a maximum of flexibility inside. So you can add 2 to 3 rooms together. You also could add 6 rooms together. And that's possible because Seishima took another horizontal circulation for accessing the indoor spaces. So you have yellow, the public circulation space, and green is like the apartment circulation space, and the rooms are placed like a sandwich in between. So you see the inside corridor, and you also have with that construction a possibility of realizing double height apartments. And you have like in this structure the maximum of flexibility to kind of like configure your apartments. Also there are outside spaces like little gardens and double height spaces you can see in these pictures. Now we go to Switzerland. It's pretty interesting project from the architects Kmür on Steib. It also deals with how can you provide your clients with the maximum of garden space or like the feeling of single family housing. And architects, they stacked the terraces, the gardens, and they alternate. So you have the possibility to get a good natural light situation, and also a private view, and yeah, a piece of vertical garden. It is also a really clever internal ground level. You have the internal corridor, and on the ground level, you have the access to each apartment. So it's like also the multi-level apartments in the whole building structure. And you also have on the bottom, you can see it, I can mark it with the pen. You have here little office units you can book or rent. So you have like the combination between office spaces or little office spaces and residential spaces on the ground floor. And you have this also this kind of like public street like the horizontal circulation or the horizontal corridor where you enter, access your apartment. Okay. Okay, I shouldn't use my comment because then my mouse is vanishing. Sorry, the same problem again. That I can't get out of the. Sorry for that. Somehow my system have to get out and quickly jump in again. give my Bildschirm again. 3. Okay. This is a view into the ground level with the access to the apartments and to the little office units. Here's a section you can see how the vertical gardens function. So there's still enough light coming into the apartments. And now we are coming to the apartment complex of the VM apartments from big architects Bjarke Ingels Group in Copenhagen, which is famous for the triangular balconies. And the really interesting strategy, like in urban planning, was that they didn't want to just organize it in a simple row, the apartment complexes. They wanted to define the space in between. They wanted everyone to give a maximum view and privacy. So they kind of like shaped the rows and created really nicely space in between. They have, by the way, really interesting also garden landscaping. When you have the chance to go to Copenhagen, you really should look at the big projects, like on the projects itself, but also on the really interesting landscape architecture. And also the interesting thing is that they have 2 types of circulation combined into the building. They have an outside corridor and they have an inside corridor. So you also can do like this strategy to mix the different types of circulation. They also have multi-level apartments. Think of the Corbusier building. You can see the corridors sticking in the middle, and every 2 levels there's just one corridor to access the apartments. You have like a good lighting, and you have really atmospheric spaces. The funny thing is when you see publications of the apartment complex, you think those triangular balcony, they're hard to live on, or that they won't work. But when I was visiting the apartment complex, it was really it was like a picture book. You could see it alive. It was a good weather day, summer day, and everyone was outside the apartment, and it was really nice to see how the house and the outside space of an apartment was used. Another interesting building is the White Tree von Su Fujimoto in Montpellier. It's also a really interesting building structure sitting close to the river and kind of like sitting in that little park. So I think that was also the inspiration of the architect to kind of like create a tree building with those kind of like balconies stacking out. You see the site plan with the kind of like organic shaped building, and you can see the ground floor, which is like in the first levels. There's a restaurant, there's a gallery, so there are like all kind of shops in the first level in this building, and on the upper floors you have the residential living unit. So it's this kind of like mixed use building complex. You can see it in the isometric drawing that like blue are the restaurants, the galleries, the shops, and then on top of it, you have the apartments with the kind of like really expressionistic balconies. The circulation is also a combination of like a core staircase circulation combined with a corridor. So he can kind of like handle that organic shape. And what is really nice that like also the balconies alternate, so you have kind of like a communicative space. You have light in your apartment, and the architects certainly generate that kind of like image of a tree. You should also look at the drawings of Su Fujimoto. They're really great to look at, really inspiring. So it's not just finished architecture, it's also the kind of drawing or the kind of expression architects visualize their ideas. A view to the apartments, also kind of like multi-level apartment spaces. And a view from the outside. Another really interesting apartment building is das Genossenschaftshaus in Barcelona. It's a building cooperative. It's a low-budget housing on an in the outer skirts of Barcelona, and it's kind of like a hybrid construction between like the main, like, how you call it, the main structure is concrete, but like all the facades and the interior walls are out of wood. And the outstanding thing of the apartment building is, on the one hand, the atrium kind of like pushed into the middle in the core of, or placed in the core of the building, and also the kind of like building or like the client strategy. You have like apartment spaces, but as you can see in the isometrics drawing on the left side, all the green spaces are communication spaces in the building. So you have a common kitchen, they cook together, they have their common laundry together, they have meeting spaces on the rooftop together, and like the red, yellow and blue color are the different types of living units, which is also really interesting because this kind of like structure describes different types of apartment sizes. And this kind of like collaborative housing, you see the atrium, you see the wooden interior walls, which gives them a really nice and natural atmosphere. And you can see that common space, which is double height. You can see on the left side the laundry, on the right side the kitchen. And it's also a strategy to reduce the apartment sizes. So the apartments are affordable to rent, and to kind of like give the space to all the common spaces in order to meet and to do things together. Another thing, think of the building apartment in Hanover. We also have flexible rooms. You can enter from the main access, like from the atrium, and you can put either to one apartment or the other, or you can rent it extrally. I don't want to point it now with my pencil because then I have to get out of the system again. But you can see how the structure works and what kind of like advantages are lying in there. Another project which I really like is the Tila housing in Helsinki from Tali Architecture and Design. It's also a collaborative housing project, a little bit different from the Barcelona type. The architect, she, you can see on the little drawing on the bottom, the architect, she kind of like provided a structure with no built-in walls, just the side room, the bathroom, and the vertical technical supply, and an empty space. So everyone, each person who kind of like bought the apartment for like a fair price, they could make the interior design by themselves and could decide how to design the apartment. And everything what is drawn in red is like the individual planning from the people who are living in the apartment. That's a view into kind of like a raw apartment. You see like the double height, you see the two levels. You can build in like a floor for the upper level, but you also can leave it open. So everyone could kind of like can design their own little world, which is really nice. When you go there and visit the apartment building, it's really obvious that every apartment is totally different from the other one. So that was the architect's apartment. She kind of like built in little boxes for individual space and let like the rest of the apartment like as an open space. Another interesting project is the Wohn- und Atelierhaus in Berlin von Heide von Beckerwatt und IFA Architects. What's outstanding there, there are like 180 parties. It's also a collaborative building or a cooperative building process. The architects planned with 180 people, the whole complex. It's a complex of art studios and residential living, and there's a Korean restaurant. There are also shops integrated. It's a 100-meter long structure sitting close to the Liebeskind Museum in Berlin. And it has a really interesting interior structure. You can see the outside, and you can see that the ends are different from the middle part of the building. And you can see in that kind of like drawing what things are integrated. You have like kind of like social workers living in there. You have like the creative people. You have shops and restaurants, but you have little working studios. And you can see on the bottom drawing how they're kind of like stacked into each other. It's also a combination between multi-level apartments and flat apartments. That's a view into like an artist studio. And you have like the indoor corridor. You can see the vertical staircases connecting to the indoor corridor, kind of like providing or giving access also to the ends of the building. And you can see in the asymmetric drawing how the corridors are kind of like connected to each other, and it's getting really interesting in the upper floors, because in the upper floors you have this kind of like light chimneys. So there's like a light void in the interior, like in the inside of the building. So you have like light into the inside corridor, which is important. And you can see it in this picture. That light is coming from the roof and lightens the inside corridor. And you can see also the stairs where you can enter again an residential living unit. In the section, it looks like that. You see a blue, the corridor and the white spaces where the light is coming from the rooftop. And you see the upper floor with the apartments kind of like sitting on that light cube, also gaining from the natural light inside the apartment. So a pretty interesting three-dimensional concept of generating a building. This is now the upper floor, and you can see those kind of like light, I call it light chimneys, and how like the kitchen sits on the light chimney and gets natural light. So I think, I hope I could show you some interesting new and old architecture. And I would like now to conclude with the FRIS 23 project in Berlin. It provides, you can see, a bunch of functions like also artist studios, like an architecture office, like a supermarket, like roof gardens, residential spaces. So it's a multi-use building. And I think it's like when you look into the future, high density housing has to address a bunch of issues and topics such as mix of uses, collective housing, and also flexible building structures. And I hope I could show you a little bit of a strategic movement. Sorry, my English is so bad. So you can continue planning your apartment complexes you're doing in your design studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for my English. I should train more.
Good. Perfect. I wonder, just a question. It seems that the naked house or naked apartment seems to be becoming very popular. And like we see it in Barcelona, we see it in the UK coming up now, and we see it in Finland. And it seems to be a really interesting type where you buy the space, but you don't buy the organization. And it seems to be extremely clever to produce, particularly to produce low-cost housing, because you're not really paying for finishes. Do you see that happening in Germany? Yeah,
like in Berlin, there's actually a big movement there. I mean, not a big movement. Those are the projects I was showing. But of course, because kind of like living in the cities is expensive, there's not much space. Like the building construction firms, they how you call it, they have a big share of the market. So you have to find strategies in order to kind of like get cheap living space, cheap and individual living space. So I think that's a concept which is getting more and more popular. And I hope that people continue planning in cooperative groups. It's certainly not as like in Austria or in Switzerland. There's this long tradition of cooperative housing. So people are much more progressive in thinking. In Germany, we had this tradition, but we kind of like we gave it up because of the building constructors and gave a little bit them the power, and we should at least get it back and start thinking in collaborative houses again. So yeah.
Stephanie, sorry, yeah, I lived in Hamburg for a while, and I remember there was a lot of Genossenschafts there. This is 20 years ago now, but that they had the money to build themselves, and I guess this was sort of ongoing credit role that they had, and quite a lot of the building stock in, I don't know, places like Barmbek and so on was all Genossenschaft. I suppose it's housing association, really. That you're saying that's sort of dying away in Germany as a rule. Is that right?
Yeah, it had like it was stronger like in the 90s, 80s and 90s. It kind of like give way to that construction housing or to the economic market. And you can see it's coming back. It's a good thing because the big advantage of the Baugenossenschaft is you can see it also in Switzerland, that the buildings are part of the Baugenossenschaft, and they want to have quality in building. They want to have building culture. They don't want to make money with it. They just have to be even money-wise. So that's, for me, that's the big difference. And hopefully, like, people are getting back to it. But it's like there's the Baugenossenschaft in Germany, where the association kind of like is building for themselves. And there also, we call it building groups, that people, for example, 20 people get together and they kind of like make a collaborative housing project. That's like in a smaller scale, but then they can like decide how the architecture looks and what they want. So it kind of like, it's not anymore like the big organizations. There are also many little kind of like different groups or building form groups, which is pretty interesting. I don't know if that's also in Ireland, that people kind of like get together and build like their housing complex. Yeah. And then you can actually save money too.
That would be extremely rare in Ireland. It's land, accessing land and accessing development land is a big problem here. Yeah. That most of the land is owned by private developers or by local authorities.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the politics have to, or the cities have to kind of like direct it. Like, for example, in Tübingen, a city close to Stuttgart, the city decided to give like certain pieces of land just to these Baugroups, to these building groups, for like a fair price. They said they don't want to buy the land to developers, but you have to kind of like organize it from the city or get the city directed. Otherwise, of course, the private developers, they have the money and they make money with it. So it's also like a really political issue.
Tübingen is a big green party city, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they have the ground or the common ground to do it. And Stuttgart doesn't have it. All the time they give it to developers, so that's pretty sad.
I think what's interesting about the housing association, the Baugenossenschaft, is that they have a long-term interest in the building. Mm-hmm. So it's built to last. It's not built to sell quickly.
Yeah.
And quality of materials, thinking about, I mean, I don't know if they do that rigorously, but thinking about the embodied energy of the building, the running energy of the building, obviously that's legislated anyway, but I think that actually makes quite a difference when you talk about building culture. There is a culture of durability. And also, I think from what I remember, you maybe can know better than me, but you can once you've joined the housing association, you can effectively, you may join as a single person, but you might have a family, and you can then move on to other apartments. And maybe there's some apartments which allow a sort of flexibility of design. I don't know.
I mean, especially because that how you call it, type of living, it's not anymore like the family with 2 kids. They're like all different kind of living forms, and the tendency is going to the single living, and more and more people live by their own, so they need communication space, like especially in that Barcelona project. You can reduce also your like living space, and you live like in a micro apartment, but you have like the share of community in the common spaces of the building.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
those are like that's the tendency in these projects, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think in Germany also there is a way the government helps the developer, but they force them later on to give a numbers of apartment to social housing. That's also it's a good mix. You will find a very good apartment in a very expensive area probably, but there is also number of apartments in this building it's not belong, but I mean, they're connected to the social housing. I mean, the people, they can't afford it.
Yeah.
They have to rent them.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing that the government says a certain percentage has to be social housing or low budget housing for people who can't afford the normal rents. That's actually a really good thing. I think the biggest problem in Germany are the developers. The developers, they kind of like go for, they're going for this percentage, but like the architecture they're planning has nothing to do with building culture. They want to make money with the rest of their apartments, and they don't keep it like just a certain percentage. So, and they don't experiment like in that moment when you are in an association or in collaborative group, you can experiment with architecture. You can, like in the Berlin project, you can fiddle around with this kind of like interior circulation space with getting light from above. No developer would do it. And it's interesting, like the big projects in Copenhagen, they started with the developer which didn't have experience in residential complexes. So they were quite open to experiment and to fiddle around. Yeah. So it's in a way, it's really the fight against the developers. And to get the land, I mean, that's the first question, to get, like in Stuttgart, for example, you have no sites anymore, you have no land. And it's so immense expensive, that's no chance to, like, as a private person to buy like a piece of land and to develop an apartment complex on it.
I mean, there is also in Germany, there is a lot of universities or architecture colleges. They doing a lot of research in experimental housing. And I think this is also a good chance to involve architects from the earlier stage, from the education head, to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there any question from a student, probably?
We'll be lucky to get anything from the students.
Yeah.
But when it's good.
Yeah, okay. And thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome, Matti. It was a pleasure. Yeah. Sorry for my English.
No, you're
Germany more fluent.
Pretty good, Stephanie, was the often when students look at plans of projects, they find it hard to unpick what's happening. And your illustrations of the strategies was very, very useful. And hopefully our students can start to use those kinds of diagrams to understand the things that they're looking at. So thank you very much for that. It was very good.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie.